Today I have a very unique message called Deep State Rising, Shadow People Who Are Controlling the System. In this message, before it's over with, I'm going to be showing you pictures that have never been made public. I'm going to be giving you information on 6 devices that they can watch you and listen in on you that most of you either have or own in your home. I'm going to talk about spying on American citizens. I'm going to talk about the global cabal that's out there called the shadow government. Let me begin by reading Revelation chapter 16, verse 13 through 14, please. It says this. This is a reference to the Antichrist and the false prophet, which are coming in the future. I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, for they are the spirits of demons performing signs, which go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to battle of the great day of God. Notice there are spirits involved in battles and warfare. And these are demonic spirits. These are not spirits from God. Now, for years, there has been a denial by the government, even in the United States, that there is such a thing called a shadow government. Shadow government is basically people working behind the scenes to manipulate things. Recently, however, there have been many books that have been written. You've seen it on certain news networks, the term deep state. The deep state is a secret cabal of men and women. They all know each other, who work behind the scenes in secret to control public interest. It is actually a network of individuals. This group wants to control all information that you hear. They want to control your buying and selling habits. They want to also control what you are able to say or not to say publicly. And they sometimes use the framework of political correctness, or they will pass laws of certain types that deal with different laws. You know what I'm talking about, that will try to limit conversations, what we can say, what we could do. The Bible itself is now being under an attack as a book that's against certain types of lifestyles, and it should never be used in counseling. Laws are being passed in the United States concerning that. Now, how do these individuals that are a part of this particular group, this cabal of people, what do they think about Christians? In the previous administration, there was a memo that was released by accident that told about what the dangers to America were and whom were the greatest threats to the United States. And I'd like to read to you 4 of the points. Number 1, if you are someone who comes off of the grid to live in the mountains or in the country area, you are considered dangerous by this cabal of people. Number 2, if you preach prophecy, especially the book of Revelation and the Apocalypse, and you deal with the subject of globalism and world government control, you are a threat to the system, according to this memo. Number 3, if you expose corruption inside the system, or people involved inside of the system that are corrupt, then the system will attempt to discredit you through the fake news media and even shut off your social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. I've had friends of mine that have had their whole system shut off simply because they were reporting the truth. Number 4, this is happening even now in some areas. If you're a conservative and you happen to be a conservative Christian, you've now been tagged an enemy of the state. Now, I know this sounds impossible because they say we're living in America. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of speech. That is a thing, ladies and gentlemen, that if we're not careful and don't protect, will be a thing in the past under this system. There have been 8 organizations that have been recognized by secular, scholarly, or mostly secular writers and researchers. See if you recognize any of these names. The New World Order, Global Government, the Illuminati, the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, the Bohemian Grove, and also the Committee of 300. Now, people, when you start teaching something like this on maybe deep state, they think you're a conspiracy theorist. They call it a conspiracy theory. But let me give you about 4 quotes from individuals who talked about some of these organizations. Here's what George Washington said. It is not my intent to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati, the principle of the Jacobsons, had had not spread to the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am. Then we have Theodore Roosevelt that said, behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and accountability and accounting knowledge to responsibility to the people. H.G. Wells in his 1940 book on the New World Order wrote, it is the system of nationalist individualism that has to go. We are living in the end of sovereign states. In the great struggle to evoke a westernized world socialism, contemporary governments may vanish. Countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting it. Listen to this quote from James Warburg, whose father was head of the Federal Reserve. We shall have a world government, whether we like it or not. The question is only, will world government be achieved by consent or will it be achieved by conquest? Then listen to Larry McDonald, who was a Democratic senator for the U.S. House in Georgia several years ago. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes. I do. I'm convinced that there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. Now, there's something called the Committee of 300. This is a title, a name that has been given by a particular writer who did the research on this. They exist in the United States, in Mexico, in Europe, in Asia, and in the Middle East, actually in places throughout the world. They are globalists in their agenda, a one world system, a one world currency, and a one world religion. They send their children to the same universities. They're connected in business. Sometimes they differ in religion and they differ in particular policies, but they all unite over one thing, which is money. They control shipping, they control trade, they control the global banking system, they control the food supplies around the world, they control transportation, and some of them even control the leaders of some of the major religions in the entire world that exist. They are all becoming involved now, and I say all, that's a broad statement, but many of them who are a part of this Kabul system are becoming very heavily in artificial intelligence. We talked about that, AI, collecting information on people and working in what we call the shadows. Now, you've heard on the news probably the term shadow government. What is the meaning of a shadow government? I'm going to give you a quote by one specialist who has studied the shadow government. It is that the political power does not reside in the elected representatives, but in private individuals who control them. Now, I will not publicly name the man, but there is one man that is behind most of all of the protests in the United States. And, everybody here is saying his name out loud, so, But this is nothing secret. This is something that is very well known. He's a multi-billionaire. He hates conservatism. He has no respect for Christianity, especially. He's been in trouble quite a bit in Europe. Certain countries in Europe just despise the man because what he did, he manipulated the money to become rich while the people in the countries suffered. And that's another story in itself. But one thing about this cabal of, let's say, the 300 is that they all know each other. And even though they are different religions, they live in different countries, they know each other. They all send their kids to major universities, either in like in the UK, in England, or they send them try to send them in the United States. A lot of times, some of their sons, the sons of a king of Arabia, the sons of a king in an Islamic country, the son of a prince in Europe, they go to the same universities in America and they get to know each other because the families have known each other for a long time. It would surprise you, even though in the United States you'll see the Republicans and the Democrats and they're always fighting each other, it would shock you how those people actually know each other, party together. Come on, somebody. They fight each other over issues, but the families are very close. I could name a family right now. It would stun you to know who some of their best friends are. Now, these political families send their children to Georgetown, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, and so on. And that, so we have this what we call a cabal and inner circle of the world's wealthiest families who literally are controlling, as I said, banking and food and transportation and media and journalism, the newspapers, and they're all a cabal of people. Now, the other thing I want to share with you, because this sounds negative when you say that, there is something good that's coming out of these individuals knowing each other and sending their children out of the Middle East, for example, to the United States. And that is that once they come out of the culture, for example, of the Middle East, and they come in the West, they begin to open up their tolerance to become more acquainted with what Christians are and the Christian faith. There are young leaders now I'm going to be careful here. There are young leaders now rising up in the Middle East that there was a day when they would never allow a Christian church to be built. There was a day they would never allow Christians to have a service in a hotel. But now, because they've been to the States and met Christians, they now are opening up their country little by little. I'm not telling you there's freedom, but little by little for an evangelist to come and say, hey, you can rent that big hotel in that country. You can come and you can rent that hotel and gather Christians together. So if there is one thing that might be positive out of this system that we're talking about is the fact that, I want to say this, that God never lets the devil control everything. You understand that? That while the enemy is trying his strategy, as Bill preached, mixing everything, God is right in the middle somewhere saying, out of this, I'm going to create an opportunity for the gospel to get out. Out of this, I'm going to let that young world leader that's going to rule a country meet somebody who is saved and filled with the Holy Spirit that can read the Bible to them. So this is the part that I don't want to leave out, that God is, to me, is the exciting thing. Now, in a few moments, I'm going to be showing you a stunning picture that was hidden in a picture frame where they were spying on a preacher, and I don't want you to miss that. I'm going to share with you some information of things that are in your house that you might not be aware of that can be hacked into or people can actually listen in on. So what I'm going to do for the next few moments is I'm going to share some pretty shocking stories, and I'm going to be careful. In most of them, I will not name the names. I may name the name in one instance, but I want you to follow me because I'm going to share with you some information that came across to me several years ago. There is a friend of mine. He's a Jewish man. He is from a very, very wealthy family. His father, as a matter of fact, was one of the wealthiest Jewish men in the entire world. His father was a diamond miner and a gemstone miner, and he had so many diamonds and gemstones that his son told me that we didn't know where to keep them at, so we hid the uncut stones in feed bags in a barn. If you'd have walked in the barn, you'd have seen hundreds and hundreds of these sacks and feed bags, and people would just have assumed that it was for the horses and the cows, but it wasn't. This man also owned an enormous amount of property in Israel, in the West Bank. I mean, some of the property is famous. Some of it is worth probably millions and millions of dollars. He would actually buy property using a corporate name and buy it under that name. This man was so well known that when he died, his son did not even realize everything that his father did. His father knew world leaders. His father flew into places and helped world leaders set up their security systems. And because the father was so well known, when this son would visit a country, sometimes he would be openly welcomed and met at the airport by government people that knew he was coming and knew who his father was, that he didn't even realize that. His father had bank accounts all over the world. He said some of these, the government came in and seized after his father's death. When his father passed away, the government of Israel, some of the people came into his father's house, sealed it off, and took barrels, just went in and filled barrels with papers and information and everything that was in the house, and a lot of it, he said, I'll never know what was in there. But he said, I did find out my dad was very high up, and he also knew everything about every politician, the good and the bad. Maybe that's why papers were taken and sealed up. I don't know. Now, he said something to me very interesting. He said, because of my connections, I was able to get an invitation to the Bilderbergers' secret meeting that happened in Greece and also that happened in Jerusalem. And he said, they welcomed me in, and he said, what I heard blew my mind. And he began to tell me a little bit of it. He began to tell me about global plans. He began to tell me about how they control the interest rates and how they control the money through the World Bank. And this was way before Greece had any problems. They were going to literally set up a system that Greece was going to have difficulty. As you know, Greece has had terrible economic problems, not able to pay their loans back. They talked about Spain. They talked about even the United States. And he said everywhere they would go to have a meeting in that country, it wouldn't be but a short time later, that country would end up in total chaos. And he said all of it is about banking and all of it is about money. He said to me, but one of the shocking things that happened was this. Because of who I was, sometimes there would be people from the United States who knew me that would stay in my home. He said, I had a man that came that worked for the U.S. government that had a laptop computer. And he said to me, is there any preacher in the United States that you want to talk to personally? He said, well, I know one. I know he's very well known, but I don't have his number. He said, don't worry about it. He flipped the laptop open, hit a few numbers. He said, I've got every number, including, listen to this, a private phone that nobody knows he has. Really? He said, let's call that number. So he called it in, and the preacher answered. And immediately when this man said, this is so-and-so from Israel, he said, how did you get this number? Nobody knows I has this phone. This is my private phone number that only a few people have. He said, well, let's not talk about that. So he talked to the man for a few moments, but the preacher was very upset because he never told him how he got the number. So then he asked this man with our government, with that computer, he said, let me ask you a question. Why do you have that man's number? He said, we've got everybody's number. He said, I can contact and tap into any phone of anyone. And he said, the reason we have these guys' numbers, now I know this is going to sound like a fairy tale to some of you, is because we can tape these people, we can tape their information and their conversations, and if they ever get on TV and say something we don't like, we leak this out to news sources. Now, this is a man that I trust 1,000% who's giving me this information. And then we continue to talk about some other things there. So I realized the system, there is a system out there, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, of how the system listens in on you. And so you don't want to go anywhere. You want to stay with me on this. Now, the second thing that I want to tell you came from a businessman in Europe. I have to be very careful here because I would never do anything to affect this man's business. I'll not name him, nor will I name the country he was from. Under the Obama administration, I received a visit from a gentleman who is a billionaire. And he's from a country that he is involved with a business. He has a huge factory in Germany, and he is involved with the business. And he actually came to me, and this is a little bit humorous. Y'all will laugh, especially my partners, because he thought I knew President Obama personally. I'd love to meet any president we have. I don't care if it's Obama. I mean, he's the president. It's an honor to meet any, but would y'all agree with me? It's an honor because of the position. I'd meet the Pope. My goodness. I mean, someone said, well, I don't know about, no, see, that's the difference between me and you. That's why God don't open any doors for you. That's why God opens doors for me to meet world leaders, because I'll just talk to any of them. Come on, you can't help somebody unless you're in their life. You can't speak to them unless they know you. But anyway, it was kind of humorous because he said, do you know the president? I said, I'm sorry, I don't. He said, oh, well, I see you on TV all the time, and I see you in Israel, and I thought maybe you could help me. And then he began to talk to me. He said, I am a man that my country owes me $700 million. And he said, they owe me because of a system that I put into that country. And the guy with him said, look, this guy's not blowing smoke here. I've known him for years. This is the real deal. And he was going to do some business work in the United States, and he just wanted to try to see if he could have a meeting to talk about how he would be able to help the United States. But he said something to me that I will never forget, and this is going to probably amaze some of you. We began to talk about world leaders and world leaders that he had sat with, and he said something to me that I had never heard in my life. He said to me, he said, you'd be shocked how many of the world leaders, especially in Europe, are Luciferians. We call them a Luciferian or Luciferian. And I said, I have never heard that term before. Now, if you go to the internet and look it up, it gives you this information, but it's a little bit hokey because this is a secret cabal of people. And I said, well, you're going to have to explain to me what a Luciferian is. He said, these individuals are from the Catholic and Orthodox background, so they have a Christian background when they were raised. But as they got older and were educated in the universities, they had a twisted concept of Lucifer or Satan. And they said they read a verse, somebody said one of their leaders a long time ago read a verse in Luke where Satan was tempting Jesus and said, bow and worship me and I'll give you the kingdoms of the world, for they're delivered to me, and whosoever I will, I give them. And he said they looked at that verse and said, wait a minute, Satan owns world kingdoms. So if we associate ourselves with Satan and we give our allegiance to him, he has the power to give us the world kingdoms, to give us countries and nations, and to make a lot of money. So he said they don't view Satan as a fallen angel or a bad person. They view Satan as someone who got a bum rap. And he said, what really shocks me is I go to state dinners with a handful of these real high-level business people in some of the nations of Europe, and the guests will say, shall we arise together and pray to our father Lucifer? And I said, this really happens? He says, it absolutely happens. And he said, it frightens me to no end because I'm a believer and I bow my head and pray to the name of Jesus. But he said, I know for a fact that there are people in high places who have dedicated or given themselves over to Lucifer, thinking he's not a bad angel. God gave him a bad rap because he's jealous of him, and he has the authority over the nations of the world. So if you're going to be a world leader and have an effective leadership, then you're going to have to somehow in some way align yourself in the allegiance of Satan, who is, Paul said it, the God of this world.